There is something most people realize too late. Not because it was hidden. Not because it was complicated. But because they ignored it. Life does not collapse suddenly. It drifts. Slowly. Quietly. You wake up. You go through your routine. You respond to what is in front of you. And it feels normal. Nothing feels wrong. Nothing feels urgent. But time is moving. And while you are busy reacting, life is being shaped. Not by big decisions. But by small ones. Daily choices that seem insignificant. What you tolerate. What you avoid. What you repeat. And over time, those small choices become your life. This is where most people make their mistake. They wait. They wait for the right time. They wait for clarity. They wait to feel ready. But waiting is also a decision. And it has consequences. Because time does not pause while you figure things out. It continues. And eventually, you reach a point where you look back. Not with pride. But with questions. Why didn't I start earlier? Why did I ignore what I knew? Why did I choose comfort over growth? That is regret. Not loud. Not dramatic. Quiet. But heavy. The Stoic mind does not wait for that moment. It decides early. It understands that life is shaped by decisions made consistently. Not occasionally. And there are certain decisions that define everything. Not because they are complex. But because they are repeated daily. If you make them early, they build your life. If you delay them, they slowly destroy it. This is not about fear. It is about awareness. Because once you see clearly, you can act differently. And once you act differently, your future changes. So this is not something to listen to once. This is something to return to. Every morning. Because daily decisions shape identity. And identity shapes destiny. If you're ready to stop drifting. And start deciding your life intentionally. Subscribe to this channel to get more of this. Because what you're about to hear will change how you think about your time. 1. Decide what truly matters. Most people never decide what matters. They assume they know. But assumption is not clarity. So they move through life reacting. Responding to whatever feels urgent. Work demands. Notifications. Other people's expectations. And because everything feels important. Nothing is prioritized. This creates a life that is busy. But empty. You are always doing something. But rarely doing what actually matters. And over time, that becomes exhausting. Not physically. Mentally. Because deep down, you know you are not moving forward. The Stoic decision is simple. You stop reacting. And you start choosing. You ask yourself a question most people avoid. What actually matters in my life? Not what feels urgent. Not what others expect. But what truly moves your life forward. This requires honesty. Because many of the things you spend time on do not matter. They are distractions. Comfort disguised as productivity. And once you see that, you must make a decision. To remove what does not matter. Because clarity is not just about knowing what to do. It is about knowing what to ignore. And that is where most people struggle. They try to keep everything. Every task. Every commitment. Every distraction. But focus requires elimination. You cannot prioritize everything. So you choose. And that choice creates direction. Because once you know what matters, you protect it. You give it time. You give it energy. And everything else becomes secondary. This is how progress begins. Not by doing more, but by doing what matters consistently. And consistency builds results. Results build confidence. And confidence reinforces the decision. This is how your life changes. Not through intensity, but through clarity applied daily. 2. Decide to control yourself. Most people want control. Control over outcomes. Control over people. Control over situations. But they ignore the one thing they actually can control: themselves. This is the contradiction. You try to manage everything outside, while neglecting what is inside. Your reactions. Your habits. Your impulses. And because of that, you feel out of control. Not because life is chaotic, but because you are reactive. You say you will wake up early, but you don't. You say you will focus, but you get distracted. You say you will stay calm, but you react emotionally. And over time, something begins to break. Trust in yourself. Because every time you say something, and don't follow through, you weaken your own authority. You stop believing your own decisions. And without self-trust, discipline becomes impossible. The Stoic decision restores that authority. You decide to control yourself first. Not perfectly, but intentionally. You stop negotiating with your impulses. You stop waiting for motivation. You act based on principle. Because principle is stable. Emotion is not. This is where strength is built. Not in moments of ease, but in moments of resistance. When you don't feel like doing something, and you do it anyway. When you feel like reacting, and you choose restraint. When you feel like avoiding, and you take action instead. These moments seem small, but they are everything. Because each one builds internal control. And internal control creates consistency. Consistency builds identity. And identity shapes your life. Most people wait to feel ready. But readiness is not a feeling. It is a decision. You decide to act, even when you don't feel like it. That is discipline. And discipline removes chaos. Because your actions are no longer random. They are directed. And direction creates progress. Slow at first. Then steady. Then undeniable. Because controlled actions, repeated daily, become powerful over time. This is how you take your life back. Not by controlling everything outside, but by mastering what is inside. Yourself. Because self-control is the foundation of everything else. 3. Decide to accept discomfort. Discomfort is something most people avoid. Not because they are weak, but because it feels unnecessary. Why choose difficulty when comfort is available? Why push yourself when you can relax? At first, this seems logical. But there is a hidden cost. Avoided discomfort does not disappear. It accumulates. Every time you avoid effort, you build resistance to it. Every time you choose ease, you weaken your tolerance for difficulty. And over time, small challenges start to feel overwhelming. Because you are no longer used to discomfort. This is where anxiety begins to grow. Not from the challenge itself, but from your lack of exposure to it. The Stoic decision changes this completely. You stop avoiding discomfort. And you start accepting it. Not as punishment, but as training. Because discomfort builds capacity. It strengthens your mind. It expands your tolerance. And the more you face it, the less power it has over you. Think about it. The things that once felt difficult eventually became normal. Not because they changed, but because you did. That is the effect of exposure. And the same applies to everything. Discipline. Focus. Hard work. They feel uncomfortable at first. But repeated exposure turns them into habits. And habits remove resistance. This is why the Stoic mind chooses discomfort early. Small challenges. Daily discipline. Consistent effort. Because these build resilience. And resilience removes fear. You no longer avoid difficulty. You handle it. Calmly. Without hesitation. Because you have trained for it. This is what most people misunderstand. Confidence does not come from success. It comes from preparation. From knowing you can handle what comes. And that knowledge is built through discomfort. So the decision is simple. You stop running from difficulty. And you start walking into it. Not recklessly. But intentionally. Because every challenge you face makes the next one easier. And over time, what once felt hard becomes normal. And that is where growth happens. 4. Decide to think clearly under pressure. Pressure reveals something most people try to hide. How they think. Not how they act when everything is easy. But how they respond when things become difficult. When something goes wrong. When plans fall apart. When emotions rise. That is when clarity is tested. And most people fail this test. Not because they lack intelligence. But because they lose control of their thinking. Emotion takes over. Frustration builds. Fear increases. Anger rises. And suddenly, clear thinking disappears. Decisions become reactive. Impulsive. Unstable. And those decisions create consequences. Not because the situation was impossible. But because the response was uncontrolled. The Stoic decision changes this pattern. You train yourself to think clearly. Even under pressure. Especially under pressure. Because pressure is not the problem. Your reaction to it is. Most people try to remove pressure. They avoid it. They escape it. But that does not prepare them. It weakens them. Because when pressure finally comes, they are not ready. The Stoic approach is different. You expect pressure. You prepare for it mentally. You remind yourself. Things will not always go smoothly. There will be obstacles. There will be delays. There will be difficult people. And because you expect it, you are not surprised by it. This removes emotional shock. And without shock, you remain stable. Now you can think. Not react. You observe the situation. You separate facts from emotion. What is actually happening? What can I control? What is the next step? These questions create clarity. Because they bring you back to reality. Not imagination. Not fear. Just what is in front of you. And that is where effective decisions are made. Not in panic. But in presence. This takes practice. Because your mind is used to reacting quickly. It wants to respond immediately. But immediate reactions are rarely clear. They are emotional. So you create space. Even a few seconds. And in that space, you choose your response. That choice changes everything. Because instead of being controlled by the situation, you are directing your response to it. And that creates power. Real power. The ability to remain steady. When everything else feels unstable. Over time, this becomes natural. You stop panicking. You stop reacting impulsively. You begin to respond with clarity. And people notice. Not because you say anything, but because of how you carry yourself. Calm. Focused. Controlled. That is the Stoic advantage. Not the absence of pressure, but the ability to remain clear within it. If you've been losing control when things get difficult, this is where it changes. Subscribe to this channel to get more of this. Because clarity under pressure is what separates average from exceptional. 5. Decide to protect your time. Time is the only resource you cannot replace. You can lose money and earn it back. You can lose opportunities and create new ones. But time, once spent, is gone. And yet, most people treat it casually. They give it away without thinking. To distractions. To unnecessary conversations. To things that do not matter. And they do this daily. Not intentionally, but habitually. Because they do not see time clearly. They assume there is always more. But there isn't. There is only what you have now. And how you use it determines everything. Your progress. Your growth. Your results. The Stoic decision is awareness. You begin to see time as valuable. Not in theory, but in action. You become intentional. You ask yourself, is this worth my time? And that question filters everything. Distractions lose their appeal. Because you see the cost. Every minute spent on something meaningless is a minute taken from something meaningful. And once you understand that, you start protecting your time. Not aggressively, but deliberately. You reduce unnecessary input. You limit distractions. You focus on what matters. This does not mean you remove rest. It means you choose it intentionally. Because rest has value when it is purposeful. But distraction has none. And most people confuse the two. They waste time and call it relaxation. But real rest restores energy. Distraction drains it. So you become aware. You notice where your time goes. And you adjust. Slowly at first. Then more consistently. Until your time aligns with your priorities. And when that happens, everything changes. Progress becomes visible. Because your effort is focused. And focused effort creates results. Not instantly, but inevitably. Because time, used correctly, builds momentum. And momentum builds success. This is why protecting your time matters. Because your time is your life. And how you spend it is how you live it. 6. Decide to take full responsibility. There is a moment in life when everything changes. Not outside. Inside. It is the moment you stop blaming. Blaming people. Blaming circumstances. Blaming timing. And start taking responsibility. Not for everything that happens, but for how you respond to it. Most people never reach this point. Because blame is comfortable. It protects the ego. It removes pressure. If something goes wrong, it is not your fault. If progress is slow, it is because of something else. And for a moment, that feels good. But there is a cost. Every time you blame, you give away control. Because if everything is someone else's fault, nothing is in your hands. And without control, you cannot change anything. You remain stuck, repeating the same patterns. The Stoic decision breaks this cycle completely. You take ownership. Not partially. Fully. You look at your life. And instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You ask, what can I do about this? That question changes everything. Because it shifts your focus from external problems to internal solutions. You stop waiting. You stop complaining. You start acting. Even if the situation is not ideal. Even if it is unfair. Even if it is difficult. Because you understand something most people avoid. Your power is not in controlling the world. It is in controlling your response to it. And that is always available. Always. This is not easy. Because it requires honesty. You must see your own mistakes. Your own patterns. Your own habits. Without excuses. But that honesty is what creates change. Because once you see clearly, you can act differently. And different actions create different results. Slowly at first. Then consistently. Until your life begins to shift. Not because circumstances changed. But because you did. Responsibility builds strength. Because it removes helplessness. You are no longer waiting for something to happen. You are making things happen. Step by step. And that creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence reinforces responsibility. And this cycle builds a powerful identity. Someone who acts. Someone who adapts. Someone who moves forward. Regardless of the situation. This is the Stoic mindset. Not passive. Not reactive. But responsible. And responsibility is what separates people who grow from people who stay stuck. Because everything changes when you take responsibility. 7. Decide to live intentionally. Most people do not choose their life. They drift into it. One decision at a time. Not deliberate decisions. Default ones. They follow. They follow expectations. They follow what feels easy. And because of that, their life becomes a result of circumstances. Not intention. Years pass. And eventually, they look back. And realize something uncomfortable. They never truly decided how to live. That realization is heavy. Because it cannot be undone. Time has already passed. But you are not there yet. You still have the ability to choose. Right now. This is where the Stoic decision matters most. You decide to live intentionally. Not randomly. Not reactively. But deliberately. You define your values. What matters? What doesn't? You define your direction. Where you are going. And why. And once that is clear, your actions begin to align. You stop doing things that do not match your direction. You stop saying yes to everything. You stop wasting time on things that lead nowhere. And you start building a life that reflects your decisions. This does not happen instantly. It happens through repetition. Daily choices. Small actions. Consistent direction. Because intentional living is not about intensity. It is about alignment. Your actions match your values. Your time matches your priorities. Your energy matches your goals. And when everything aligns, life becomes clearer. Not easier. But more meaningful. Because you know why you are doing what you are doing. And that removes confusion. It removes hesitation. It removes regret. Because even if things are difficult, you know you are moving in the right direction. And that is enough. That is what most people are missing. Not success. Direction. So you decide. Not once. But daily. To live with intention. To choose your path. To act with purpose. And over time, that decision shapes everything. If you are still here, then something inside you already understands. This is not just information. It is a decision point. Because everything you've heard comes down to one thing. Choice. Not big choices. Daily ones. The way you think. The way you act. The way you respond. And those choices are happening constantly. Whether you notice them or not. This is what most people miss. They think life changes in big moments. But it doesn't. It changes in small decisions. Repeated over time. What you tolerate. What you avoid. What you commit to. And those patterns become your life. So if you want a different life, you don't wait. You decide. You decide what matters. You decide to control yourself. You decide to accept discomfort. You decide to think clearly under pressure. You decide to protect your time. You decide to take responsibility. You decide to live intentionally. And you repeat those decisions. Every day. Not perfectly. But consistently. Because consistency is what creates change. Not motivation. Not inspiration. Discipline. And discipline is built through repetition. One decision at a time. So don't try to change everything today. Just start with awareness. Notice your choices. Notice your patterns. And when you see something that needs to change, act on it. Immediately. Because delay creates regret. And action creates progress. Slow progress is still progress. And over time, it becomes transformation. If this changed the way you see your life, then don't stop here. Subscribe to this channel to get more of this. Because this is not about motivation. It is about mastery. Mastery of your mind. Mastery of your actions. Mastery of your life. And that starts with a decision. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not later. Now. Because one day, you will look back. And you will either see discipline. Or regret. And that outcome is being decided today.